Okay guys, in this video I'm going to show you how I take my ICC setups or how I mark my charts when I'm taking trades when it comes to ICC trading strategy. I'm also going to show you the trades that I've taken this week so that you'll be able to know how I was thinking before taking those trades and how I think after taking the trade. So without wasting much time, let's get right into it. Now before we begin, I would like to show you the trades that I've taken this week so far. Now you can see that for this week, price has been really slow when it's in terms of its movement as compared to the previous weeks. As you can see here, price was moving a lot in just a day. Price was just pumping, and here price is just moving. It looks like it's moving sideways, especially when you check Ethereum. Now for me personally, I trade only crypto and commodities, so I trade only 2 pairs, but I have 4 pairs because I look at positively correlated pairs, because sometimes the structure is much better on one than the other. So I make a decision based on the one that has a much pleasant market structure. Okay, but I trade only 2 pairs. I've been trading this for months now, and I've been trading these 2 pairs for months now, and everything has been much simpler for me. So how do I mark my charts when it comes to ICC trading strategy? So usually I like to come to the 4-hour time frame to look at the overall market structure. 4-hour time frame is a much larger time frame, and it shows a general direction as to where the market is going to move in for an extended period of time. Okay, that is why I like using the 4-hour time frame. The daily time frame is also good, but it shows much less information as compared to the 4-hour time frame. So I like looking at the 4-hour time frame. Now when it comes to the 4-hour time frame here, usually what I do is that I mark important levels where price might react off of. So you can see that price was in an uptrend throughout last 2 weeks, and then it failed to make a new high, made this low high, gave an indication, a downward indication. So it was bearish the whole of last week. Now, one thing I really look out for is internal structures. Now, what do I mean by internal structures? Now, when I look at this market, this is all I can see, and I'm going to show you why this is all I can see. So this move might happen or it might not happen. It depends on what market wants to do. But this is all I can see in the 4-hour time frame. I don't see anything else. Now you can see that when you look much closer, there's this small structure here. There's this small structure here. And then when you look here also, you can see that there's a much smaller structure in between. These are what I personally refer to as internal structures. So I don't usually pay attention to these structures, to be honest, because they are misleading and might confuse you into taking wrong trades. So I really watch out. And how do I easily identify internal structures? For those of you who might want that. So for example, let me show you something like this. So you can see that market is in an uptrend. So this is the 4-hour time frame, and then suddenly market makes this kind of move. So now you can see that when you look at the move that market made here on this 4-hour time frame, when market makes this move and it gives this kind of move here, personally I would compare whatever move, I'll compare the size of this move to whatever move that market was making previously, and if the size of this move is smaller than that of the other moves, I term this as an internal structure. Okay, so, and I don't make decisions on the higher time frame based on this kind of structure, because it usually turns out to be an internal structure. Okay, so this is something that you have to take into consideration, and I think this has been clipping a lot of IC traders and messing around with a lot of IC traders. So it's something that you should look out for. So this is all I can see. So the whole of last week market was just moving down. Now when we look at Ethereum, You can see that market was not much pleasant when it comes to Ethereum. So this is the trade I took on Monday, and I'm going to break it down. It was a win. It was a 1 to 3 risk reward win that I took. So you can see that it was also moving upward. It was in an uptrend, and then it kind of made this internal structure here, and then it broke this low, and then everything has been much messier, to be honest. When you compare this price action to Bitcoin, you can see that although they have the same objective, Bitcoin is a little bit more organized. So this is why I like to compare the two pairs. Now let's look at the trade that I took on Monday. Now when it comes to this week, you can see that from this movement here from last week, I tried to avoid this move because in my mind I was having this struggle of the expectations that I was putting on price versus what price was actually doing. So expectations. Okay, sorry for that. Versus price action. This is something that I subconsciously, suffer from. And I think some traders also suffer from this also. That you would have a bias, a certain bias that you bring to the market, which is very bad in a sense, because when you have a certain type of bias, you usually want to find, clues to support your bias instead of looking for what price is actually doing. You try to find clues to support your bias, and it's a very bad thing to do, and it affects your psychology a lot. So I came into markets thinking that price was going to make this lower high, lower low, lower high, lower low, and then make some kind of lower high here, come below this level, and I'll sell for a lot. That's what I was thinking. So I was just ignoring all this price action. I decided not to trade this, although I took some buys here. But yes, I think I took some buys here. I took a buy when price tried to go back up here. The buys was right around here. Yep, I think I took this buy and then I got out right here because I was thinking that price on the 1 hour time frame, and since price is supposed to correct on the 1 hour time frame by showing a trend, this is how I thought it would go down. So something like this, a new high, higher low, new high, and then possibly make a lower high, and then I would sell below this level. That is what I had in mind. But you can see that price had a different agenda in mind, and that's what it wants. And I'm glad I was able to get out of this trade before this trade happened, this sell happened. So as you can see, most of the times, what price is actually going to do, it will be much different from what you expect it to do. So this is something that I'm trying to solve, and I think that's led me not, touching this anything here. So I didn't take any trade all throughout this. And maybe if I didn't have that, thing in mind, I might have taken some buys here, to be honest. I think this was an indication, this was a correction. And my 1 to 3 would have overstretched, so I might have held this position until that 1 to 3 got hit. But I decided not to touch anything here, to be honest. And so fast forward, this is Saturday this week incoming. You can see that price is just moving up and then breaking these lows. So when I came here, I think this was around Saturday. Usually I don't trade on the weekend because normally there's no volume on the weekends, so I avoid trading on the weekends. When I came here, you can see that price had given this sort of indication here, and then it's made this higher low. So again, I'm not going to take any trade on the weekend, so I didn't take any setup from here. Now when price made this, you can see that price made this higher low here. So I marked this level. Why did I mark this level? I didn't actually mark this indication level. I marked this higher low. Why did I mark this higher low? I marked this higher low because price has given an indication. And then if price gives an indication, it needs to find a level of support in order to bounce off of to give a new high. And this was that support. So I marked this level, and then I marked this highest level to show this no trade zone here between buyers and sellers. So I think one of the things that I want to speak about is the no trade zone, how to identify no trade zones so that you save yourself a lot of headache and money when it comes to the ICC trading strategy. So you can see that when price tried to break above, make a new high, it failed to do so, and then it came back down. This price action is not something that is normal. And the normal price is supposed to make that high because it has given a high low. It came down because there was this level of sellers, so it wanted to grab liquidity so that it can break that level of sellers, but it wasn't able to break that level of sellers because they came in much stronger. So this price action is usually not normal, and you should mark the area between the level of sellers and the level of buyers, and then just wait for price to break any one of them. So this is what I did, but I didn't take the trade here. I actually took the trade on Ethereum, which is very interesting. So when you go to Ethereum, this was what price was looking like. So this was that Saturday. This was the Saturday, and you can see on Ethereum it was the same structure. Price had given an indication here. After breaking this, it gave a higher low. Okay, then when price gives a higher low, you are supposed to enter on the continuation. But again, I don't like holding positions on the weekends because usually price doesn't have much volume on the weekends. Sometimes it does, but as compared to the days that price doesn't have volume on the weekends, that is much less. Or price usually doesn't have much volume on the weekends. So I don't like holding any position or taking any position, especially Friday evening going to Saturday and Sunday. That is me personally. So you can see that when price made this high low here, I marked this high low, and then I marked this level here. The same thing that happened on Bitcoin. Now, normally with the ICC strategy, you are supposed to wait for an indication. But here is something I've realized. When you have a supply zone, okay, and then you have a demand zone, or when you have resistance and support, and then you have price between the resistance and support. So price is just going up and down the resistance and support. Usually I leave alerts above, just a little bit above and below the supply and demand zone, or the resistance and support levels. And why do I do this? Now for the ICC, we all know that you are supposed to wait for an indication, correction, and continuation, but it's not always that you have to wait for an indication before you take a trade. Sometimes you can take a trade when price, so for example, if let's say this was a buy example and price did something like this. Now if this was within a weekday or a day whereby we are expecting some volume like Monday, Tuesday, and because crypto doesn't have a specific London or New York session, it usually sometimes has volume despite the time. As long as you are in a weekday, sometimes Asia has a little bit volume on crypto, and sometimes too you need that New York volume or London time, but sometimes it has volume. So once you are between Monday to Friday, price gives me something like this and then it hits my alerts. I usually take a trade here because of this high low. I'm trusting price that because it's made this high low, it's wanting to choose the upside. So when I take a trade, I usually leave my stop loss below the low and target a 1 to 3. Or if there's a higher time frame stop loss, I use that. There's a lower time frame stop loss, I try to use that lower time frame stop loss, which is usually not safe. But sometimes because of the higher low, if there's enough volume, price usually doesn't come back at this level, but to be safe, you are supposed to use the higher time frame stop loss to be safe. So this will be a buy example that I usually do or usually use after price is, or after price consolidates, because the idea is that the reason why price is consolidating is because it's trying to gather liquidity, because sometimes price is accumulating. Most people call this the accumulation phase. So price is trying to accumulate money and it's trying to wipe out people who want to hold buys or want to extend some buy. So maybe people try to sell from here and then, or people try to buy from here and then price sells and then people try to sell in the middle and then price will buy and then it should be all over the place in the middle here. So price is just gathering a lot of liquidity. So the moment it decides to give a higher low and break above, I'm thinking that it has all the liquidity it needs to make a move. So I'm not expecting price to come back down. So usually I take a trade. So for the short example, this is what you're going to see, or this is what I usually see and I make a decision off of. Okay, so maybe price will make a lower high and then boom, it's going to move below that support level. So in this case, because of the lower high, I'm seeing this lower high, I'm going to take an entry, even though this is the indication. I'm going to take an entry because I can see that there's a lower high here, there's another lower high here, and there's a high here. Even if there's no lower high here, you can see that I have this lower high and then there's this high, and it tells me that sellers are pushing stronger, are pushing price stronger downward. So I get this confluence or this, I trust price enough to usually not come back and then take me out or do anything funny. So this is what I do, and then I take trade when it comes to consolidating markets. And you can see that that was the exact thing I did. So immediately price broke this level, I took the trade because I know that there's a lower high here. As you can see, there's this lower high here. So when price broke, you can see that it never decided to even come back to that level again, because it was accumulating a lot of liquidity here. You can see that people try to buy price at this point, and this is the weekend, so it's really good that you don't take trades on the weekends, because you can see that price was not having enough volume. So you can see that price took all this money here, and then when it came back below this level, it did not hesitate to sell. So you can see that when you go to Bitcoin, it's the same kind of move on Bitcoin. I wanted to sell on both Bitcoin and Ethereum, but I realized that it might be just me multiplying my losses. If in case I lost, to just me multiplying my losses. So I decided not to take that trade on Bitcoin, but it played out on Ethereum. So I think that was everything. Okay, so my network was a little bit on the messier side, but let's look at the remaining trades. So you can see that after I took profit below this level, I took profit because when you go to the 5 minutes time frame, you can see that price was rejecting. It was rejecting here, and I didn't want to see this fight. There was a lot of fighting between buyers and sellers, so I decided to take profits right around here. And then immediately after that, you can see that price just went to give another indication. So in my mind, I was thinking price was planning on turning back bullish again. As you can see, you cannot see anything useful over here. So usually I go to BTC and see if there's a much clearer perspective, and as you can see, BTC is much clearer on its price action. There's something like an indication, a correction. So I'm thinking that okay, price might want to go bullish. So what happened? Price made this lower high and made a new lower high. So this was where I closed the trade on Ethereum. So this is where Ethereum made that indication, but as you can see, Bitcoin did not. So it made this equal low, which was very interesting to me. Now, equal low to me rings a bell. It means that price is, wants to stop its downtrend, is having that idea that it wants to stop that downtrend and it wants to move up. So that is what I have in mind. And the price made this lower high. So I'm thinking that, okay, there's a no trade zone between this and this, because now price could have given an indication instead, then giving a higher low, and then would have taken it from there. But price, what? It didn't do that. It gave this new lower high. So I'm still down for sales if price breaks this level. That's what I'm thinking, because I'm thinking, okay, there's this lower high, this lower high, this lower high. All the price made this equal lows. If price wants to go bearish, it will break this level. And if it breaks this level, I'm taking the trade. But then I was also looking at this, since price was on a downtrend, and then buyers are now stepping in by being more aggressive here. When price made this high low and it hits my alert, I think my alert was right around here. I took buys above this level, and you can see price wanting to push, but it didn't. And I think my stop loss was right around here, which shouldn't be the case usually, because normally my stop loss should be here. But again, I'm looking at this high low that price has given, and based on this high low, when price came above this level, I'm thinking that you are good to go. But you can see that there was not enough volume. I don't know if this is a volume issue or it's price still wanting to be bearish, but price sold for some reason. And when you look at the 4-hour time frame, you can see that price might still want to, move up. My network is really bad. Okay, so on the 4-hour time frame, as you can see, price really didn't move up like I expected it to. So we kind of sold. And when we look at the third trade, I think this is a volume issue, because consider BTC has been moving up quite a bit, and I think the expectations problem that I was having was also being applied here, because I was having these two, point here. I think I marked this level here and this level, and I was expecting price to either break one of those. And when price broke above this, I should have switched my buyers to, back to buys, because price has given an indication that the sellers are still not planning on taking this down. But I didn't take, this trade. I just decided to still wait on it, because I knew that the 4-hour time frame has given a strong upward move, and it might need some kind of major correction. So I wanted to, see if market will shift to the bearish side. So as you can see, I had my alerts right here, and then I wanted to take the trade up here, to be honest, because price gave an indication, gave a higher low, tried to make that continuation, but it failed to do so. So I marked this level as a level where price might be bearish if it breaks. But when price got to this level, I think it was very early in the morning. I think it was around 5 o'clock, and I was asleep at that time. It was, I think it's 3 hours before landing session. Yes. So I was asleep at this time, and when I woke up, price was all the way down here, I think around 6 something. And I decided to wait in case there's any movement. So when I decided to wait, I realized that, okay, this might be some kind of internal structure. So I placed my alerts down here. In any way, if price breaks below this level, then maybe price will move down. When you come to gold, you can see that price was reacting off of this level of bias. You can see here, price was reacting off of this level of bias. So I didn't want to, sell between this zone right here. I wanted price to break this zone so that I'll sell below. And I think I should have waited a little bit more for, maybe London volume or New York volume, so that I'll sell below this level. But I decided to sell today and I think price is going to hit my stop loss. I think this is how the trade looks like. And for this, I use my 15-minute stop loss. So my stop loss is around here, right around here. So again, you might think that waiting for the indication is good. And don't get me wrong, for ICC, you have to always wait for the indication. But sometimes the lower high entries also, are one of the best entries, because I think if there was a lot of volume in this market, price would have just kept pushing because of, the lower highs that price was making. So I don't know what this market is going to do. Just let it play out, and hopefully maybe Asian session is going to move it a little bit. Who knows? But until then, let's see how it goes, and I'm going to update you guys on how this trade goes later on. And the way I trade is really simple. I raise 10% of my account, and I'll be able to make about a 700% return on my $40 account. I think I started with $40. I was struggling with my psychology, so I had to work on that. So I started with a $40 account, and now the account is around $300. So I'm moving with that. If there's a lot of consistency, I'm going to get a profit account, and I'm going to move from that profit account. So this is the update I want to give you guys. Thank you for watching this video. I'm going to see you in the next one.